Good afternoon, LEC community. I'm Edgar Palacios. I'm the founder of the Latinx Education Collaborative. If you're joining us today, we are thrilled to have you. We're excited about this conversation with one of our great community members, Emily Francis, who is an author, and she recently wrote a book, If You Only Knew, Letters from an Immigrant Teacher. Help me welcome the one, the only Emily Francis.
Yeah!
Hey, Emily.
Can you hear the clapping?
It is loud. It is rambunctious. The people are
Oh.
elated. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. So I enjoyed a beautiful day home today. We have a somewhat of a snowstorm in the Carolinas, so 2 days being home and can't wait to get back to school tomorrow. But I'm excited to be here with you today.
Well, fantastic. We in Kansas City are experiencing multiple snow days. It feels like the kids have not been in school all year. That's probably an exaggeration,
Oh.
but it's been a wild time for so many reasons.
It's a teacher's worst nightmare because then they were trying to cram up all the, standards and objectives in just a limited day. So it's a headache for us too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for making the time to join us today. And
Yeah.
for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what brings you to this point in your journey.
Right. Well, thank you so much again for allowing this platform to share about me and my book. Of course, I am a teacher at heart. I've been teaching for 21 years here in Cabarrus County in North Carolina. But the journey to get where I am today and be doing the impact that I'm doing in teachers and students today took a long time. From being an immigrant, being born in Guatemala to coming here to the U.S. as an undocumented immigrant and unaccompanied minor to high school dropout to now being an educator. It feels like it's been like forever. But I'm excited to have the opportunity to share with students those experiences that my students are bringing as they come into the classrooms as newcomers.
Absolutely. What part of the Carolinas are you in?
I am in Concord. Really, it's like 15, 20 minutes from the city of Charlotte. So if you know where Charlotte is, you can find me.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, like what have been your takeaways? Actually, let me ask that question differently. In this moment, we're seeing a lot of anti-immigrant, a lot of anti-DEI kind of policies coming at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. Um, how are you feeling in this moment, particularly with all the ways you identify and you intersect with what's happening? How are you
Yeah.
feeling in this moment?
It's hurtful. I have the privilege to say I have a green card. So if y'all want to see it, I have a green card. So even though I came here as an undocumented immigrant, I have the privilege to have the documents to be able to work and not feel that fear that so many students and so many parents and so many people are feeling right now. You can see it in their face. Sometimes they don't even have to say anything. And because I experienced on documentation and I know what it is to have that fear to be deported, you can sense it. People don't even have to say anything, and that fear just comes through. And I've had a couple of talks with teachers that if students are walking in campus with that in their mind, forget about content. They're not thinking about y equals mx plus b, whenever they have so much going on in their heads. I mean, they open social media, they see it. They watch the news, they see it. They go to the grocery store and people are talking about it. So you can't escape this. So, even professional developments. I was sitting in one just last week where they were talking to us about how to approach this with families. And it's the first time that I cry in a professional development because I'm being limited to what I can say, what I cannot say, what I can share, what I cannot share. So it's very frustrating. It's a very frustrating time as an educator and as someone who advocates for diversity and culture and educating the whole child. It's having to get the community together. Like I'm having to meet with people I have never talked to before to say, give me some ideas. What are you doing in your state? What are you doing in your community? Because we've got to get us together to fight this battles that we're fighting in our cities and state, in country.
Are you feeling supported at all in any way, shape, or form from your community?
I will say yes. I mean, starting from my administrator, I think he was the first one that I was hoping that he will come up and say something. So he was the first one on the day one, pulled me out in the hallway, and we started talking about what ifs. And so that's great. It's great to know that administrator has your back. The administrators are telling you that they're with you whenever something like that will come up. And then of course you have higher level administrators in like you know the Department of Education who are making choices to support us. So somewhat, yes, I feel like we are being supported, but I'm relying heavily on my network. Social media network is heavy right now. So I'm glad that I have these connections all throughout many different states, because this is the time when we can use those connections to learn from one another.
Absolutely. And speaking of connections from across the country, we have Edwin Perez. Saludos desde
Hola,
Baltimore.
Edwin.
Good to see you, Edwin. Thanks for joining us. Um,
Yeah,
you know, I think community is so critical and important, and I think
yeah,
also with sharing that you have access to people not just in your local community but also at the
that's right.
national level. I think that's pretty awesome. Um,
Right.
I think we first met you. I could be wrong, but I think we first met you through the Expresión Fellowship that we.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
I was one of the first ones, I think. I
yeah, I
think
think
I
you
was
were
one of
part
the
of
first.
our inaugural.
Yes. Oh my. And I was just on LinkedIn and I saw Luis Ortega. He's the leader, right? With you
Yes.
guys doing this. And he liked that I shared about this presentation today. He's one of the ones that I learned, so much. I mean, I knew how to share my story. I knew how to embrace my story, but through the storytelling fellowship, I've learned how to feel not pobrecita, like, oh, like I want to tell you my story and I want you to feel sorry for me. We don't want that. So I am so grateful that I was allowed to be in the fellowship program
Well,
for
we were so
storytelling.
grateful that you joined us and you participated. It was. I remember talking to Luis initially about it and seeing like how would this
Yes,
work. It's important to build personal narrative, right? It is a tool of advocacy. It is a tool of also acceptance, right? Like understanding your
absolutely.
cultural identity and how important it is um,
Yes.
in the school context. And so Yvonne is affirming me here. Emily was part of the
Yes, I
inaugural
was one of the
program,
first ones.
of
Yes.
the year. Um, did that have any influence, or how did the lessons that you learned in Expresión help you start writing your book?
Yeah, well, first of all, like I said, personally, it helped me embrace more of some of the parts of the story in my life that I really didn't know how to embrace and share. So I learned that part, how to be myself, how to love who I am, and then taking it a step further, and I learned how to have my students do the same, how to create an environment where students feel comfortable to share, because I knew about trauma and I had, strategies for trauma informed pedagogy and all of that. But I think in order for students to feel comfortable to share, we have to be equipped to create a comfortable environment. And I feel very strongly that the lessons I learned through the Storytelling Fellowship allow me to create that environment in my classroom where students begin to telling me their personal life. Stories can come and tell you a story like, hey, I ate tacos last night. That's important. But when they tell you those little details that make inform their identity, oh gosh, those are the details that you start taking notes. And those notes is what became part of my book.
Your book is titled "If You Only Knew: Letters from an Immigrant Teacher." Like, what didn't we know?
Oh my gosh. All right, so let's see. First of all, it was supposed to be a memoir. This book was all about Emily Francis. And when I talked to my editor, my publisher, it was going to be a story about me and allowing me to share my story. But in the end, it turned into from that memoir to let's write about those stories and those connections. And that's how it turned to be into letter writing and information about my students and my own intertwined.
Um, we got just a quick comment, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. I love hearing my students' stories and share about their culture and tradition.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And definitely, and it's important for us not to say, I love it and keep it to yourself. No, allow the platform to say, oh my gosh, your story is so important. Let me provide a platform for you to share it, whether it's writing it, blogging about it. I have students who are submitting writings about their families and winning competitions at the state level. So yes, Jennifer, I love the fact that you are loving your student stories, but create a platform so the whole world know these fabulous stories.
Were you nervous? Like, tell me about the process itself in crafting these stories. It's such a act of vulnerability. I would think to put it all on paper and then having somebody read it and give their
Yes.
feedback. Tell me more about that process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really have to give a huge, huge shout out to my editor, Sarah Welch is my editor, and then my publisher. And we sat, to talk about these stories. I mean, we cried. There was a lot of tissues everywhere. There was a lot of, gasping and writing and taking notes. I mean, shout out to a lot of the work that they helped me do, because as an English language learner, it probably would have taken me forever to write this book, to put my thoughts, down on paper. But they helped me through the process, and we had a script done. We went through the script, we edited, we took stories out, we pushed stories in, and it was a process that took 3 years, and probably would have taken me longer if I would have done it by myself.
That's quite a commitment of time. Did you find that the story shifted over that process? Did you find that you were remembering more? Um,
Yeah, I think one of the frustrating things was that, there's only 8 stories in the book, and I've worked 20 something years in education. So I had many, many stories that I would have loved to incorporate in the book. And we didn't want this book to be, like thick big book with 100 stories. We wanted to make sure that the stories that we are being told were intertwined with mine. So whenever we found a story that didn't really go with my part of the story, then that story was taken out. So that was frustrating, because I will be like, no, I like her story. Like there was one of them, I believe it was Cecilia's story. They were like, nah, this doesn't quite fit. Let's take it out. And we were in the process of taking it out when I started sharing about, social media and making those connections. And I was like, okay, let's connect it. Let's connect it. So that was the frustrating part, but it ended up being such a wonderful, wonderful book.
just quickly, Sue Moreno, I believe a cohort member, if I'm not mistaken, and fellow educator. Sue, thanks for watching.
Yes. Hi, Sue.
As you talk about the 8 stories that made it into the book, is one of them more meaningful? One stand out to you, or one surprised you in its inclusion of the book?
What surprised me is like, I mean, all of the stories are wonderful. I'm not going to say that I have a favorite story, but two of the stories that just, they're deep in my heart and I just will never, ever let go. It's actually the first and the last story. So the first story, and if we didn't work it out to be like that was going to be the first story, but Orlando's story, he was an undocumented immigrant and he crossed the border, and actually he crossed the river, and he, between the lessons, remember what I was telling you at the beginning, that how students need a comfortable environment to share their stories, where we were reading an article about how Avi Said crossed the river, and he pulls out his phone and he shows me how he crossed the river with his mama. And that's when I realized that, wow, how important it is to have a place where students feel comfortable to share, not just with me, but he shared it with all his friends. And so that's one of the stories that stuck with me. And then the last one is Jaime. Jaime is the reason why I shifted from elementary education to working at the high school level. His excitement to be in school mirror how I felt as a 15-year-old. Like, I saw him coming in, jumping in class, and I was like, that was me. I remember that excitement. And then remembering how that excitement can really fade away. How teachers can take that excitement and that fire for education and just really burn it down. And I was like, I don't want that for Jaime. And so those two stories that I really, really stuck in my heart are the beginning and the end of the book. And between all of them, there's many other stories.
What did you learn about yourself in this process as you got to reflect, as you got to remember? What kind of new lessons did you take away from the experience?
I think what I've learned is that I am who I am because of my students. Like the pedagogy, the lessons that I choose, the way I treat parents, the way I teach teachers, the way I keep growing. Now I'm starting to get my doctorate degree. Like, I want to be better because of students. And so, but by processing this book, by learning more about my students, by reflecting myself and connecting with students, makes me such a much better teacher and person. And I think that's the greatest takeaway for me.
That's a really beautiful sentiment. I appreciate you sharing that. We have
Martha!
our stories are now more important than ever. We need to bombard
Yeah.
the country with our humanity. I adore your story and how you created that space for your students to find union next to you. What do so let's say you are in front of a new educator, right? They're entering into their first classroom. It's their first year teaching.
Mhm.
What advice do you give them based on your experience?
When you first graduate college, you have just finished reading so many books, so many articles, and given so many methods and ideas and strategies and ways to teach. That's what you're getting paid for, right? To teach. And I think that's great. You're going to step into your classrooms. You got your backpack with all those activities that you received. You have all that knowledge on what it is to teach. But and then let's not forget that the reason where we're being placed in the classrooms is to educate human beings, like humanity first. I don't care as a 15-year-old who is thinking about whether my mom and my dad are going to be home when I get home. I don't care about your fancy lesson. Let's put it like that. Students don't. They don't care about that you spent all night drafting the most perfect lesson. And so, as a new teacher, think about that first. Yes, create great lessons. Yes, make sure your pedagogy is where it needs to be, that strategies are effective. But think about humanity. Look at your student in the eye, ask questions, know how to say their name, know their parents, reach out to them, make those connections. And golly, your teaching is going to go a much longer ways than if you start the other way around.
I have so many thoughts on that, but before I get to them, Dr. Clark, I bought your book last week, and it was amazing. It made me think of how it must have been for my grandparents when they immigrated here. Um,
Thank you.
Storytelling, I think, in this moment is a radical act. I think from what I understand, from what I'm seeing happening across the country, um, it seems like we are trying to erase stories. We're trying to erase
Mm-mm.
history. We are trying to, also not think about how are we creating those safe and inclusive spaces.
Yeah.
Um, and it is strange to live in an
Mm.
environment or in a moment where storytelling is an act of radical nature. And so, um,
Yeah.
how are you
Yeah.
thinking about this moment, and particularly like your book coming out in this moment, and
Yeah.
what does that mean to you?
There's that quote that is actually in my book in one of the chapters. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Nothing that is happening out in the world is going to take away that seed, that who you are. Everything you do and everything we do is because of our experiences. Like who we are is core to how we interact with other people, how we decide to impact other people. And so that's never going away. So regardless of people, you know, telling us not to read certain books or not to say certain words in the classrooms, that's inside of us and that's never going away. You can't remove that. Like I am who I am, my identity is me, my culture is my attribute. You can't take that away. So as much as this noise that is going on right now is happening, we are going to grow. We're going to have our students sprout where if we really continue the pace on growing our students, on focusing in humanity and getting all together as a community and making sure that we're growing responsible human beings and allowing them to share their stories, even if you're not, putting that on social media. Talk to your partner, talk me, maybe as a community you can do something that you can share. Here in my community, we're about to have the public library is about to bring diverse authors to share about their stories. There are things we can continue doing, but we can't stop. Nothing should stop us, and nothing had ever stopped us in the past. They have tried. There has been many times when our voices have wanted to be silenced, and they buried us, and we just came through and flourished. So let's continue doing this. Just stay together.
You're getting some love here from Susana Iglesias. Hey, Susana. Thank you for what you do, Miss Francis. What as you look towards the future, right? Are you thinking about authoring more books? Are you thinking about going on tour? What's the next step for you?
Well, yeah, tours they haven't stopped since the book came out. Because I'm still in the classrooms, it's very limited the amount of invitations I can accept. But I do travel at least once a month. You'll see me out and about. Like this weekend, I'll be in Houston, Texas for the Texas TESOL conference with my book. And, there's just opportunities like that to share. But I love sharing it in social media. That's one of the platforms that I use to share about my book. A lot of classrooms and universities are using it. Just this week, I was at UNC Charlotte, where a class of pre-service teachers were reading it and creating lessons based on the book. So that's amazing. Other book, yes, I have book two in works. But being in the classroom and trying to get a doctorate and trying to travel and being a mama and a wife, and it's just taking a little longer than I anticipated it. But this book is little and it's an easy read. I mean, anyone can sit down and read it in a day. Really, it's an easy read. And the purpose for that easy read was because we wanted students to get a hold of it. You can have a middle school or a high school student sit down and read it. It's an easy read. And of course, teachers are reading it because it's quick. But I want a much heavier book. There are some things that couldn't make it to the book because they're very deep, they're very personal, things that I wouldn't want my students, not that I don't want it to know, but it's not things that could be read in a classroom per se. And so I'm working on that. Give me a few years, we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. I think you take as much time as you need, right? I think those stories will continue to kind of live and grow and take their own. So, um,
Yes.
our work is we think about representation and the importance of Latino representation in schools. Like, we understand that Latino students are the fastest growing demographic in our
Yeah.
community. We understand Latinos are incredibly diverse, right? We, as a community, transcend race, ethnicity, language, religion, all these things.
Mhm.
How do you think your presence has impacted the lives of the kids that you have taught and served over the years?
When I go back and think of myself as that 15-year-old sitting in the classroom and not having that one teacher to connect. It really hurts, when I close my eyes and think about that 15-year-old longing to connect with one of those teachers, because I wanted to be a teacher, so I wanted to see what that was about, but I never had that. First of all, because they didn't look like me, so I was kind of scared to approach them, and second of all, because I was lacking in the English language, so that barrier right there. And me being in the classroom or walking in the hallways and students see me like the same hair color, same skin, we speak the same language, and they can approach me very comfortably and ask questions or share or, ask for ideas, or I have the authority to say, if I did it, you can do it, and they believe me. It's not the same as if a monolingual English teacher will come and say, you need to graduate high school. But if you haven't walked my shoes, you don't really know what it is that I'm struggling with. But Hispanic students, especially if they are undocumented or if they struggle on the way here and they are dealing with some trauma that needs to process, I can identify that and I can approach the student and have those connections to be able to help them heal. I think that's one of the most important things, and one of the greatest things that I have is that I can identify with those pains and say, I feel you. Like, really, I do. Like, let me show you where I've been and how I can help you process what you are going through. And it just creates such a strong relationship between teacher and student.
I was not expecting you to say the word heal, and it just it was like that's such just a powerful, I think, expression of the importance of representation, and particularly folks who have walked the pathway and have been ahead of
Absolutely.
you. I
Yeah.
really love this idea of like how it helps young people heal from the
Yes.
the traumas that they've experienced and their journeys. I think that that's a really powerful frame.
Absolutely, absolutely. And through the storytelling fellowship, I learned that storytelling heals you. I mean, Luis Ortega will, share a lot about this process, how sharing about those things, and it's not easy. That's why when I go across the country and teach teachers how to do this storytelling process, we do not put students against the wall and say, tell me your story. Because as soon as you start telling those parts of your life, it triggers things that you might not even quite remember or didn't know that were there. Our subconscious conscious will start bringing things to the surface that we didn't even know it was there. And that's why when I do a storytelling lesson or activity in my classroom, the first ones that are notified are my school counselors. As soon as before I even introduce the storytelling pathway or the storytelling lessons unit for my students, I have already shared with my guidance school counselors and say, if you see my extension popping up in your phone, don't even pick it up. Just run, like come to my classroom. I've had this happen before where students in the middle of just reading, but as soon as you read something that reflects your own identity, it triggers something. You start thinking about your own experiences, but that's healing. That's what I have to explain my students. That's how you begin to heal, reading about it, talking about it, sharing about it. And so if I healed through that, I want my students to also heal.
Uh, Dr. Silva sharing some love here. And then also, question: is there a Spanish version of the book? I would love to use it in my heritage courses.
Oh my gosh, there is, Marta, there is. I finally finished translated. It's ready. I am just waiting on my illustrator to do Si tan solo supieras, cartas de una maestra emigrante. So as soon as I have my cover ready in Espanol, I'll upload it and it's good to go. So I am excited because I have so many Spanish speaking students in classrooms who want to read it. So, yes, it's coming. That is coming.
That is awesome. I'm glad we broke the news right here in this moment. We also have Nabil. Nabil, good to see you. Storytellers are healers, quote unquote, ring so true every day, but in today's times.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
of course, a resounding yay from Dr. Silva.
Love
Um,
it.
teachers are navigating a very difficult time, right? And one, understanding everything that's happening at the federal level, again, state level, at the district level. Um, Teachers are being looked to have answers and to provide answers, but sometimes answers don't exist. Some teachers may be directly impacted by, actually, most teachers are going to be directly impacted by the things that we're seeing happening on the ground.
Mm.
Um, and teaching already is a very difficult and hard profession,
Oh
right?
yeah.
What do you say to a teacher in the classroom today to encourage them to stick around and continue to to be a part of the profession?
Yeah, it's exhausting, like mentally, emotionally, and everything else. I come home 3:30, I'm on the couch and I want to put my feet up and get my glass of water and just whoo, decompose, kind of refresh myself from the day. But there is something I do every day without fail. And is as soon as I'm out of campus, I get in my car and I promise myself to do this every day to not burn out. Before I even start my car, like I have my hand in the engine and I'm about to turn it on, and I said, what did I do today that is going to make me come back tomorrow? There's got to be one thing, like growth process. What did I do to what impact did I do today? What life change did I do today? Oh my gosh, today I taught Alex how to translate a PDF by himself so the teacher doesn't have to do it. Yes. And I just turned the car on and I breathe. We have to do that. There is no way, if you are really an educator with passion, if you're an educator who really cares for humanity, if you're really an educator who pours in over 100%, there's no way that you're not going to think of one thing that is going to make you go back tomorrow. And it's not the paycheck, because we know that's not the paycheck. But that's that one thing. And just hold on to that one process, that one thinking, that one idea, that one change that you did that day, and go back tomorrow and do even better than what you did the day before. And so that's going to help you a day at a time. Things change. So let's take it a day at a time until you finish the school year. And then you do the school year. And then you're going to do another school year. And then you're going to move on until you retire. I don't even want to retire. Like, I'm getting my doctorate so I can keep going.
We love the energy and we love the encouragement, and I think it's so. I mean, I think there are people who will hear this conversation and say, like, I may not have one thing, right? Like I may feel like I'm pushing against everything and I can't find that one thing, but I do think that that is important, right? It is the mindset and it is the framing of how you move forward, right? Which is storytelling in itself, right? It is how you
Yeah.
frame the
Right.
the story.
Yes.
We a couple more comments here. Jennifer, I loved reading your stories. It brought tears to my eyes. It made me be an even bigger advocate for my multilingual students. We love to
Beautiful.
hear that. Our
Yeah.
MLL
Thank
learners,
you.
they need all the support and advocacy
Yes.
available
Yes.
to them. Joaquin, good to see you. Awesome. I will use both the English and Spanish version with my students.
Yay. Thank
Um,
you, Joaquin.
Anna, good to see you. Brava, daily affirmations. Yes, change the one person changes the world.
Oh, absolutely. You have to believe that. You have to believe that.
So you have accomplished a lot. You're about to become a doctor. Um, what
Process.
what's your hope for the future?
Keep continue impacting students. Like, I go back and I look at pictures. Just yesterday, one of my former newcomers, I mean, back in elementary school, she came in with not a word of English, very scared. And just yesterday, her picture in the military outfit popped into my feed. I was like crying. I mean, those are the impacts. So just continue doing that. I just want to continue impacting lives, impacting teachers, and continue doing the work that is much needed. I don't want a position where I don't deal and talk with students, because that's what we're in here for them to raise our future generations, our future teachers, our future doctors, our future, oil changers, whatever. I had my former student change the oil in my vehicle. So we are raising individuals who are impacting society, and I want to continue doing that.
Mm. I want to invite the community who is present. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the comments. We will definitely raise them with Emily. For those that have not been able to purchase the book, where can I find the book? Where can I go get the book? Where can I get a signed autograph of the book? A signed copy of the book.
Well, for a signed autograph, you'll have to find me at a conference or somewhere like that. I'm always sharing where I'm going to be at. So this weekend, I'll be at Texas TESOL. So you find me there for an autograph copy. Otherwise, you can find it in Amazon or the Silets website. Just put if you only knew Silets. There's also a study guide that is free to download. You don't even have to buy the book. But if you want to take a sneak peek of, the study guide, go for it. The Silets website has a free study guide for that I helped create, and we have so many great ideas on how to use the book and how to use other books to help your students tell their story. So I'll be happy to autograph the book anytime you see me anywhere.
I am curious. Well, let me ask you this: what are your favorite books outside of? Yeah, I see a lot of books in the background.
Yes. Oh, no. Listen, if you have never read Solito, which I'm sure Marta's over here is going to say, yes, Solito is definitely my go-to. And, No Somos de Aquí, 3 Guatemalans who ride La Bestia to get here to the US. Like, I have never done that. I don't know what it is to ride La Bestia. And so just reading about, and all of these books right here are by authentic authors. Don't buy books by someone who has no idea what it's like to cross a desert, to leave a family behind, to be family separated. If their family has gone through it, if they know firsthand what it's like, get the book, read it, and give it to your students. But don't waste your time with books that are not. But yeah, there's so many other books, so many great books that you can read. We're only like 2% of immigrant stories. 2%. We need to do more. We need to encourage our students to want to become authors. I have one of my seniors who 3 times in a row has won author of the state. Like, he has written entries and so that encourages, maybe he'll become an author. Who knows? We have the opportunity and the power to encourage our students to see themselves in books and give them that little push that they can become an author themselves too.
Dr. Silva, agreeing with you.
Yes, beautiful story.
So 21 years ago, you arrived to this country, correct?
No, actually 30. 21 years ago, I started working for the state. Yeah.
30 years ago, you arrived. What do you say to little Emily?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you've seen those commercials. They make me cry every time. Like, there's this doctor in her little outfit, trying to do their homework, and then they see the actual doctor, like their faces like becoming what they want to be in 10 years. If I could really see myself what I was like in 30 years, I would be like, I got this. I got this. It's hard. It's hard to see where you will be in 10, 20 years. That's why it's so important for us to paint that picture for our students. I wish I would have had back, in high school, a counselor or a teacher that will tell me, you got this, you can be the teacher you always wanted to be. I think if I would have had that cheerleader behind me, it would have been easier to get there. But I feel like I had to do a lot of it myself. And if I ever, had the chance to go back and see Astrid Emily Corcuera Bonilla sitting in the very back of the room, look at her straight in the eye and say, you're one day going to be training teachers like that teacher who is ignoring you. And so it's amazing. It's amazing opportunity to be where I am and having the opportunity to do reversed, like go back and try to, I'm not fixing things, but where I am, I can fix things. So I'm on campus, I'll fix things on campus. I go to another school, I try to fix things right there. I think we all have the power to impact our society, to make things better than it was for us.
Absolutely. You got to start where you are, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like a ripple effect.
yeah. Um, are there any stories, anything that you want to share that you didn't get to share in our time together today?
Well, there's one story that didn't even make it to the book, and I wish it would have been. I tell this story every time I go out in the country and into other country and share about this. But my very first year as a teacher, they called me from the office to say, "Hey, you have a newcomer enrolling, like fresh from Mexico to the US, and it was me, like, I want to make sure I make a good impact. And here am I running to the office, to catch up with Jose. And Jose becomes part of the school community. He found that sense of belonging. He was teaching other kids how to speak Spanish and doing presentations in Spanish. And it felt so good that I was putting in practice everything that I have learned in college, and at the same time putting in practice what I would have loved for teachers to do with and for me. And so this kid ends up leaving elementary school, exited ESL, like he had mastered the language. He was making 4s and 5s in math and English and in science. And just last year, he graduated. But the coolest thing is that before I even saw him at the stage graduating, I saw his mama, Martina. And we both like, "Oh, Miss Francis, hi, Martina." And we ran to each other and we hugged each other. And it made me realize that if as a teacher and parents, we don't come together, we don't produce what we want to produce for our children. Like teachers can do a lot and parents can do also a lot, but if we don't work together, I just feel like we don't have the outcome that we really want for our students. And so that's where it was a learned lesson for me, that we need to collaborate with parents and take what education they are receiving at home and take the education that we're getting in school and merge that together to create great human beings.
Mm.
So that's a story that didn't make it in there, but I always love to tell that story.
I think it's a great lesson, right? I think
Yes.
I think a lot about is that education isn't the responsibility, so the sole responsibility of a teacher or a school or a district, right? It's a community endeavor, and
Absolutely.
those relationships are important because it's
Yes.
everyone. It takes everyone. Before we
It
wrap
takes a
up,
whole village.
Wade has a question. Is there a Kindle version of the book? I have some Venezuelan friends living in Portugal who I would like to send the book to as a gift.
Yes, that is available. So just go to Amazon and you can get a Kindle version of the book. So, yes, thank you so much for sharing.
That is so awesome. Well, Emily, I so appreciate your time with us today. Thank you so much sharing about the book and your story. And please let us know how we continue to support you and educators like you across our community.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate everything you do. The support that you bring us means a lot. Like just knowing that there is a group of intentional support for teachers for us to do better, it makes a whole lot of difference. So I appreciate everything you do.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. And thank you, LEC community, for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next episode. Enjoy the day. And I heard a rumor that at least in Kansas City public schools, there will be in person tomorrow. So I don't know if that's going to be
I
the
hope so.
community,
Like,
but
I need to go back. Like, I need to finish testing.
well, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your
Thank
day.
you guys so much.